Better Big 12, bigger Big 12, 40% bigger for at least a couple seasons. Welcome to the Voice of College Football on a Sunday afternoon. Hope all is going well where you are. Probably a bit hot and sticky, but hey, it's June. It should be a bit hot, a bit sticky out there. The summer of 2022 and the most eventful college football offseason we've ever experienced, and we experienced it together here at the Voice of College Football. And again, the latest involves the Big 12. Not earth-shattering, because we've known since the Big 12 was plucked from by the SEC. Of course, Texas, Oklahoma engineered and initiated the moves to the SEC, so not blaming the SEC for poaching here. Texas, Oklahoma moving to the SEC as scheduled right now, 2025. I have my doubts about that timeline. The Big 12, per my suggestion, of course, here at the Voice of College Football, but it did work out that we had that suggestion made just a couple days after the Big 12 lost Texas and Oklahoma. Check out the video. Big 12, go out and grab the 4 best fits and best programs that you possibly can. Go get them right now. Don't waste any time. UCF, BYU, Houston, and Cincinnati. And here we are now with the announcement just as of Friday that the Big 12 will expand to 14 teams if the timeline with Oklahoma and Texas stays as is. Leaving the Big 12, entering the SEC in 2025. We've got UCF, BYU, Houston, and Cincinnati joining the Big 12 in 2023. So one more season with a 10-team Big 12, and then the Big 12 is actually going to skip 12, belie their name, skip the 12, and go to the 14, and then eventually settle back into the Big 12. And be the Big 12 for the first time since what? The first time since 2011, when Texas A&M and Missouri left. Also Nebraska and Colorado, adding West Virginia and TCU. Subtract 4, add 2 in 2011, going into 2012, and the Big 12 becomes the Big 10 in terms of number of teams, and now will eventually be the Big 12. But I am intrigued by the possibilities of scheduling and championship game matchups for the Big 12, and expanded Big 12, temporarily expanded by 4 for possibly, as it stands right now, the 2023 and 24 seasons. I don't believe it's going to remain that long. I just don't see Oklahoma and Texas being lame ducks of sorts in the Big 12. They just have too much on the line, too much money, too much prestige to be hanging out and not going forward with their futures, although they can be preparing for play in the SEC in all sports, but specifically football. Of course, that's what we care about, football, and that is the big challenge for the Big 12 would be football. I don't think it's a big leap when it comes to basketball or baseball in particular. Softball as well. But we focus on football here, and the Texas-Oklahoma dynamics of the Big 12 is, of course, fascinating in terms of how their level of play translates week to week. We know that Texas is talented. They sucked for 12 years, but they've been talented. And we know Oklahoma has put up quantities of wins and has participated well with the SEC, except for a few showdowns with the elites. So there's that side of it. We'll discuss Oklahoma, Texas to the SEC, of course, and any thoughts that you have about that challenge, that transition. And then also now that we know the 4 from the American Conference, and we can also talk about the number of programs leaving Conference USA. And this is a domino trickle-down effect, of course, that is going to hurt the group of 5 more than anyone. The transitions continue in the group of 5 level that get little notice, but with the 4 entering the Big 12, what that looks like. And my biggest fascination in all of this would be this. For, let's say, as it stands right now, 2 seasons, and they're probably going to take that away from us. I love awkwardness in sports. I love the oddities in sports, and we're only going to get this oddity for potentially 2 years, and that might be taken away from us. And you're like, what oddity? The oddity that Texas and Oklahoma stay in the Big 12. The other 4 join. The other 4 are pretty darn good football programs right now and should be for the next few years, for the foreseeable future. The future looks bright for all 4 of those incoming programs. I've stated it a number of times ever since expansion hit last summer that the Big 12 glass half full is that they're gaining Cincinnati, BYU, Houston, and UCF collectively at their peak as a package. This is the peak of those 4's existence in the history of college football. Not necessarily for each one, probably for Cincinnati. UCF's only a couple years removed, 2017, 2018, from its peak. Houston has had a much richer and deeper football tradition going back, of course, to the 60s and 70s in the Southwest Conference, playing big time, big boy college football then. So arguable for Houston. You wouldn't say that for Houston, although 2015 was impressive, 2016 was impressive, and then they popped up with 12-1 this past season and a win over Auburn in postseason play. And then for BYU, they've certainly peaked in 1984, of course, and then at other times 14-1, 1996, a couple big seasons under, of course, Bronco Mendenhall was a consistent winner there, but collectively, so not necessarily the peak for the other 3. Cincinnati, yes, the other 3, but close to their peak, and collectively, all at the same time, the peak of the Big 12 receiving those 4. So that is the good news. Cup half full for the Big 12. They're getting those 4 at the opportune time. Although glass half empty is that they are getting those 4 at their peak collectively, meaning there's maybe nowhere but down. BYU strung together a lot of 7-6, 8-5 over the past 10 to 15 years. Cincinnati was 4-8 pre-Luke Fickell. Luke Fickell's first year was 4-8 at Cincinnati. That was only 5 years ago. Luke Fickell isn't necessarily going to be Cincinnati's coach forever. UCF was 0-12 right before Scott Frost joined. And then we've got Houston, of course. They didn't have the best of seasons the last few years. Before that, 12-1. They were middling around 500. Now, of course, these 4 programs should be bolstered by inclusion in the Big 12. Of course, the key element in all of this in regards to the Big 12 maintaining credibility and consistency, consistent discussion in major college football is, of course, the tie to the playoff. How is that going to be handled? Because right now, we have a Power 5 that we discuss. We discuss the Power 5. The College Football Playoff Selection Committee also discusses the Power 5, but there's no decisive inclusion-exclusion status among the Power 5. The committee could select 4 group of 5 teams. There are no stipulations, no guidelines, no rules about that. Based on playoff proposals going forward, there is going to be a distinction made between group of 5 and Power 5 in terms of formal inclusion into the playoff and the opportunity to receive a bye. So this is critical for the Big 12 to prove, and maybe that's what will be the audition. The audition may be the likes of those 4 added to the remaining 8 in the Big 12 versus Texas and Oklahoma, seeing how they compete nationally. And again, in conference against Texas and Oklahoma before the Sooners and the Longhorns leave, to see, okay, what do the metrics of this new conference look like at the upper levels in trying to determine, is this truly still a Power 5 conference? Many of you Big 12 supporters will fight for that Power 5 designation. You should, rightfully so. I get it. I understand. Other detractors will say, without Texas and Oklahoma, forget it. You're not. Who are the elite? You know what? You're both right. You're both right. It's a good conference, intriguing, interesting conference. Without the 2 and with the new 4. Fascinating. Over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, who knows who's going to win the Big 12? We look at the other conferences and mark in Ohio State and Clemson and Alabama and Georgia. They're going to do it this many times, and maybe Penn State sneaks in or Michigan sneaks in or maybe Miami gets back. And no, the new Big 12, that is the most intriguing guessing game of who is going to win that conference year to year. Baylor, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. Dave Aranda maybe moves on. Back to hitting the skids at Baylor. Oklahoma State, Mike Gundy, consistent 8-4 program year after year after year after year. Boom, they peak this past season at just within an eyelash of a college football playoff appearance. Of course, in the Big 12 championship game in that goal line stand, go back to 2011. Oklahoma State was right there to appear in the BCS championship game. But in between, they're 8-4. TCU under Gary Patterson, different program. TCU of late, not great. Kansas State, Bill Snyder's peak, yes, competing for BCS bowl games. Since then, nice little program under Bill Snyder and now Chris Kleiman. Nice little program. That makes for good college football. If you're into watching good football on Saturday, if you're into watching competitive teams and a competitive conference from 1 to 10, if you're into that, but most people aren't into that. I am. I'm going to love the new Big 12. Gonna love it. Because that will be the one where we can't just pencil in, okay, here are the playoff teams. Ooh, what's going to go on in the Big 12? If anyone has a forecast on who's going to be winning Big 12 championships and who's going to be near that upper echelon over the next 5 or 6 years, fill me in. I don't know. I can make projections, but I don't know. And I produced a video, Cincinnati, BYU, Houston, and UCF, looked at their scores against the Power 5 and looked at the level of play that they have participated in against the Power 5. It's pretty impressive. Again, pretty impressive means top 25, top 40. They're in that range. They're playing 500 ball basically against the Power 5. And they're playing the elites a little bit, but mostly they're playing a lot of 7-5, 8-4, 6-6 Power 5 teams. And they're beating the bottom tier teams, the Illinois and those sorts of opponents. Cincinnati, home and home against UCLA, swept them, beat Virginia Tech, a bad 6-6, 6-7 Virginia Tech team in a bowl game, winning those games and competing a little bit better than that. Of course, Houston had its nice run with Greg Ward at quarterback and Ed Oliver on the defensive side of the ball, winning games against Florida State, Louisville, and others. Oklahoma, good run by Houston, but they're not there despite 12-1 last year. Not there right now. Fascinating. If you love football, fascinating. If you love the playoff, not so fascinating. because I don't think I've got a team, a consistent program for you to compete. And so the playoff committee, if it's put into its hands versus some other committee that they come up with to determine group of 5, power 5, who gets the buys, does the Big 12 still exist in a power 5 status? Who's going to compete for a playoff spot? Expanded? Sure. Your winner of the Big 12, who's going to go 10-2, 11-2 with a championship game win? Fine. They'll be a 8 seed. Fascinating stuff there in the Big 12. And then also my last point before we take some calls here at the Voice of College Football. Do we have calls coming in? We will take those here in a second. 860-499-3332. Before we post the number on the screen, check out the ticker down below. Venmo, PayPal, Cash App. Those are the most effective ways to contribute to the Voice of College Football. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Just search Mark Rogers TV. You bypass YouTube that way, or we've got the Super Chat available. And I would like to make a special note here, special recognition. Somebody else may say shout out, but I don't say shout out. So recognition here for Shoelace Sooner. Shoelace Sooner, I hope you're watching. And based on the comment that you made that I picked up on, this comment's a month old. Sorry, I'm just getting around to it. You're probably not watching right now while we are going live. You're probably watching later because it seems like you catch up with us a little bit later. I've never seen your handle before, but hey, you say, Mark, I want to give. I want to contribute. Let people know it's not just the super chat and the super stickers live, but the super thanks, so you can contribute to a pre-recorded video. So we have posted a number of content this week involving Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan, and others, Texas A&M. Check out those videos. You can contribute not just live, but again, keep in mind Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App, most effective as well. And also the super thanks to the pre-recorded videos. Thank you so much for that reminder. Loveless, loveless, shoeless. We could take that to another category. Something came to mind when I said that. Shoeless Sooner. 860-499-3332. And my other point in all of this involving the new expanded Big 12 and the supersized Big 12 for hopefully 2 seasons. I don't know that it's going to go that far, but what I'm hoping for is the supersized Big 12 for 2 seasons would be the matchups. The matchups. And I've brought this up a couple times and people correct me immediately, and you're probably right. And I believe that this approach is going to be the one that the Big 12 is going to take to try to stave off as much controversy as possible. But you know what? The Big 12 could actually benefit from this. 2 seasons, let's say, with the Texas-Oklahoma situation, with the other 4 coming in. If I'm the Big 12, I'm going for broke in this way. I am scheduling Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, and BYU to play my 2 outgoing members. I don't care what they have to say about it. If Texas and Oklahoma balk at that, you know what? Bye. See ya. We give you the schedule. You don't make the schedule. We're the conference. We make the schedule. I would load them up. I would just make sure that if Oklahoma and Texas are going to be around for another 2 seasons, I would make sure that everyone in the conference plays them at least once each, and plays them at least once each at home. Not both of them. They can't all play if you're going to move in the other 4. But man, if I'm the Big 12 and I want to prove myself to be a legit Power 5 going forward, I'm unleashing those 4 on Texas and Oklahoma, and I will live with the results. Because if Texas beats BYU, who's going to make a big deal about it? Nobody. And those four are going to play competitive with those two. They are going to be at least competitive. So when Texas beats BYU 34-31, that actually looks good for the Big 12. Texas has been down, but they're still Texas, and they're going to the big bad SEC. If I'm the Big 12, I'm scheduling BYU to play Texas. If BYU beats Texas, if I'm able to schedule all four against both of those two. Now, this is the max scheduling opportunity here. Those four against Oklahoma and Texas, that's 8 games each season. That's 16 total games. And I think those four can go 7-9. Say they go 7-9. I think that's a feather in the cap of the Big 12. And we say, you know what? Those are two supposed to be contending teams, big blue bloods, leaving the Big 12, going to the SEC. We just went 7-9 with four of our not necessarily best teams. They're in the upper categories. We can compete. And the metrics or the optics, pardon me, the optics of the situation also involve who is going to participate in conference championship games. So if Texas and Oklahoma play in the final 2 Big 12 championship games, then move on to the SEC, then that's a bad look for the Big 12. The two that are leaving us are on the stage. They're on our biggest stage and they're leaving. That's horrible for the Big 12. Now, the Big 12 avoided that this past season because think about it. The expansion news came down in the summer, and then Oklahoma State and Baylor made the Big 12 championship game. So good for the Big 12. The Big 12 made it through one season, avoiding any kind of, I don't call it embarrassment. Those are supposed to be the two best programs, but avoiding looking bad. They got Baylor there and Oklahoma State. Two of our existing and future members made the championship game. Let's make that happen again and again. But if Oklahoma and Texas make it, and especially if they then struggle in the SEC, then that's going to make the Big 12 look bad. But if the Big 12 can get especially its new members in these two championship games, that would be phenomenal. I would love that. That's a dig on the SEC. That's a dig on Oklahoma and Texas. That is just phenomenal. If we could see really anyone, if it's TCU and Texas Tech playing in the Big 12 championship game, that still accomplishes the goal. But especially if it's the new members of the Big 12 that are able to play better than Texas and Oklahoma, and we have a UCF Cincinnati Big 12 championship game in 2023. That would be phenomenal. Let's take your calls. Would love that. I also like the regular season matchups. And I will get to those in just a second, but let's get on the line here. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hello, Mark. It's the real MVP. How you doing?
Doing well. I am feeling good today. How are you?
I'm doing good. The first thing I would ask you is, what are the odds that Oklahoma and Texas have to travel to West Virginia and BYU in the same season?
Oh, I'd stick it to them. I'd do everything possible. That didn't overtly seem ridiculously bitter or resentful.
Yeah, but I think you're a lot lower on this than I am.
Okay.
Because I'm looking at this as this is kind of their, well, not their floor, but kind of their middle between the four new teams, because they're entering the Power 5 conference. It's going to increase the recruiting. It's going to increase their revenue share.
Yeah.
And they're already really good.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to, two or three of them are going to take a leap forward.
They certainly have opportunities from a recruiting standpoint to do that. You know, you've got UCF right in the middle of Florida. You've got Houston in one of the best NFL cities. And I'm not talking about the NFL team there. I'm talking about producing high school talent that goes on to the NFL. Atlanta and Houston are ridiculous. So I'm with you. I got you. And Cincinnati's in a prime location with a nice TV market in the state of Ohio and obviously playing lights out.
Yeah. So how would you schedule it with the 14 teams? Because they can't do a round robin anymore. Would you do divisions? Would you do pods? What would you do?
Well, it's only for 2 seasons max. So there doesn't need to be some kind of long range planning in terms of, okay, we want to do this right because we're thinking down the road that we want some collection of teams A, B, and C to be together and all that. Well, it's going to get torn up maybe after 1 season. The way it looks now, based on the timeline, 2 seasons. So you don't have to do anything you don't have to be that forward thinking. It's a patchwork situation. I'd go to 2 divisions. Now that would be another interesting strategy. Going to 2 divisions thinking, I want to promote our 4 new teams. I want to put them in the best possible position. So I don't know if you stack them all up in 1 division to try to get one of them in the championship game, or you split them hoping that they both go to the championship game.
I imagine for travel purposes, having UCF play either BYU would be brutal.
Yes, it would, but they're going to. They're going to anyway.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, but I would imagine you would you try to mitigate that as often as possible instead of making an every year trip.
Yes, for sure. For sure. But again, you're going with divisions in the interim, and that should be a different strategy than your long range planning, which falls under what I'm thinking you're talking about, where yes, BYU and UCF, that's the biggest distance / West Virginia, BYU. And you want to stay away from making them travel all over the place. Yes. But for the 2 years, I'm doing what's best for the look of my conference for those 2 years, kicking Oklahoma and Texas to the curb.
So, and another thing that I haven't heard you talk about is in terms of just the football on the field. I would make the argument that these 4 teams are better than Oklahoma and Texas in the future. Not in terms of the brand, not in terms of the money they're bringing in, but just in terms of the football that's going to be played on the field. Would you agree with that?
Well, it's hard to compare 2 versus 4. But, so there's a certain value to 4 over 2 because the Big 12 is right now the smallest conference. So they lack number of games. Think about that. Every Saturday when you divide you get 7 games out of the ACC, the Big 10, and the SEC, and you only get 5 out of the Big 12. Therefore, there's less likelihood that there's going to be a marquee game or a collection of good games, and it just covers less of the TV landscape and less attention. The less teams you have, the less fan bases, all of that. So there's a value to more is better, unless you're going to add on garbage onto your conference. You don't want to do that. Rutgers and Maryland. So but we're talking about quality here. So there is a factor there that just says, okay, the 4 is better than 2. In terms of football playing, yeah, if you're going to say, let's play football right now with what we've seen over the last 5 years, then you're going to say, if you smashed all these teams together and said, you're going to keep playing each other like twice a year, and we're only making a 6-team conference, you'd have to say over the last couple of years, Oklahoma would be the best, but Cincinnati would be close. And then, the other 3 have been better than Texas And that's even comparing, and I know from our conversations, we'll even, I don't want to say put down the group of 5, but we'll put it in its rightful place. But even taking that into consideration, Texas, they're struggling with the likes of Kansas on a like every other year basis and losing to the all sorts of middling teams. And they played BYU's home and home about 6 or 7 years ago and got buried. So they would have been your 1 seed is Oklahoma, your 6 seed is Texas. Not just barely, but it is Texas over the last 3 to 5 years. Yeah. And the other 4 are the middle 4.
Okay. And the final thing I'll ask you, Mark, is out of these 6 teams, which one is most likely to make the playoffs after they change divisions or conferences?
What are you giving me? Oh, during these 2 years, if we get 2 years, or after that?
Yeah.
During the 2 years, Oklahoma.
Okay. And what about after they go to the SEC?
Well, if we're going to 12 teams, then that helps out Oklahoma and Texas more than it does these teams in the Big 12. Because they're going to get a whole lot of respect for going 9-3 in the SEC. That's probably a playoff season. It's borderline playoff. So going forward, man, I still like Oklahoma. Somebody's got to coach Texas that is going to show me that they can coach.
Exactly.
Whoever the next Texas coach is, I might be giving up on Sarkisian already, and it might be too soon, but he didn't do the job at the other 2 spots, and now he's off to a bad start there.
Okay, Mark, that's all I got for you. Final thing I'll say is shout out to Tennessee, #1 team in college baseball, and they're not even going to make it to the College World Series. So congrats, Tennessee.
What happened there? They were the #1 team after the Super Regionals and during the regular season, but they got knocked out?
They're going to get they're down 7-3 in the top of the 9th.
Okay. Who are they playing?
So congrats. Notre Dame.
Okay. Good stuff. I like college baseball. All right, the real MVP. Yeah. I appreciate it.
No problem. See you next time.
Not that I've seen any college baseball in years and years and years, but I covered college baseball, and I was never exposed to college baseball. Growing up in Ohio, it was all about Major League Baseball, and I went to Mississippi, and people told me, wait till you see some college baseball down here, going to places like LSU and Alabama and Mississippi State. And it was impressive. It was fun. It was fun covering regionals. And I just got into the super regionals. They just launched super regionals when I was covering college baseball in 1998 or 9. And I actually covered a super regional in Columbus, Ohio at Ohio State, and one at Texas A&M, and then going on to the World Series. Great stuff. Great stuff. Got to see a lot of future Major League Baseball players, and I enjoyed college baseball. Just the time thing. If somebody forced me to flip on the TV and watch a college baseball game, it would not be torture. Absolutely not. It'd be fun, but I just don't pay attention. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's J-Dub. How are we doing this afternoon?
J-Dub, I'm doing well. What's going on with you?
Hey, when I was a Bama student, I got to watch Bobby Sigfin, Rafael Palmeiro, and Will Clark play in Mississippi State.
Yes.
I got to see Kelvin Schiraldi play. I got to see Bo Jackson play. Yep. There's a lot of good baseball.
Yeah.
And let me tell you what, if the Irish can finish this off, this will be so sweet. The Tennessee players have embarrassed themselves with some disgraceful on-field antics the past couple of weeks, and their fans have proven to be the mustard bottle throwing, not the highest quality fans. And for Notre Dame to go into Knoxville and knock off the overall #1 seed, that would be only the 4th time the overall #1 seed has not made Omaha in the last 23 years. And to put that tag on Tennessee would be just sweet. Roll Tide.
Okay. Interesting notes there.
Hey, I have to tell you, I get paid, not that great, but I get paid to take photos at Iowa State and Iowa games, of course. So this Big 12 thing, I am loving this. I hope it lasts for 2 years. I'd like to see the 5 Texas schools, Texas, Baylor, Houston, TCU, Texas Tech, put with Oklahoma and BYU in a Big 12 West. Iowa State, Kansas State, West Virginia, Cincinnati, UCF, and Oklahoma State, go to the other side. And let me tell you what, I brought this up to Jamie Pollard, who's the athletic director in Ames. He wouldn't say anything, but he just smiled. And I said, this is a really good chance to just put the punji stick underneath the fingernails of Texas and Oklahoma and really make them pay for leaving. I mean, I'm with you. I'm completely with you on this. I think the Big 12 could really stick it to Oklahoma and Texas the next year or two, and I hope they do.
Absolutely. The commissioner and everybody affiliated with the Big 12, their mission, their job is to do what is in the best interest of the Big 12. Well, technically, Texas and Oklahoma are still members of the Big 12, but in a practical sense, they're moving on. We all know this. Therefore, their job is to protect the Big 12 and work in the best interest of the Big 12.
Yep. I would have Oklahoma and Texas, all three, or both of them, making three or four long road trips this year. I would have them both play, next year. They can't, not this year, obviously, but I meant next year. I'd schedule them against all 4 of the newcomers and put them on the road. And say, all right, if you want to stay one more year, then you can get the new 4. You can get the new 4 guys at your place, but you've got to stay in the league until 2024. If you're sticking around in 2023 and you haven't paid your buyout money, you're making road trips to Salt Lake City, Cincinnati, Orlando, Houston, and by the way, Morgantown might be on your list as well. I mean, there's no apology needed. There's no apology needed. Oklahoma and Texas stuck the knife in the back of the Big 12, and now the Big 12 can turn around and without batting an eye, do it right back to them.
Yeah, I would take every measure possible that's fair. I'm not going to have order any officials to make certain calls on the field or anything like that, but absolutely.
Right.
You need to work in the best interest of your conference, and the best interest of your conference is what's going to happen in 2024 and 25 and 26 and 27. Well, you got to position your conference in the best place going forward in this new world of college football playoff expansion, and you got to prove that you're still a Power 5. You got to make these 4 members strong. Absolutely. Yeah,
and the other thing is, it's not going to break any hearts in the Big 12, on the Big 12 campuses, if it is a weakened Oklahoma and a weakened Texas that end up going to the SEC. I mean, if they go in on a down note or they go in a little wobbly, then that's even more better for the Big 12.
Yeah. Yeah, there's, like I said, a lot of different optics that are interesting about the whole setup, because the optics of who makes the Big 12 championship game is going to shed a light on whether Oklahoma and Texas are really that strong and really holding up the league. And I'm not talking about money and prestige and all that. I'm just talking about playing football versus, okay, did these 4 really add something? Are they coming in strong and posting nice records in the conference? And it's going to be fascinating. And that's going to transition then with Oklahoma and Texas into the SEC. Okay, do they come in strong? Well, that kind of looks good for the old Big 12. Or Is Texas going to get browbeaten for a couple years? Like if they play like they have the last few years? Yes, they will. Yeah, it's all very fascinating. And just from a football fan standpoint, J-Dub, just wanting to see interesting football, because we have so few non-conference games. What are the odds that Oklahoma's going to schedule UCF and Cincinnati and all these teams, or Texas is going to schedule these teams they're not going to schedule these teams non-conference. We may not see those teams play unless they're playing in a Liberty Bowl as 7 and 5 teams for 20 years. So as college football fans, I want to see these teams play. I want to see Texas and Houston back in, as you mentioned, putting them together in a pod or a division. That's great old Southwest Conference football right there. I want to see those two teams play.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a sop to the old Southwest Conference, putting all those Texas schools together again. And you telling me that Houston people aren't slobbering over the chance to play the Longhorns, who've been dodging them for years? Yes. Oh, yeah.
What's funny when you think about the history of some of these schools, there's not a whole lot there, but BYU took it to Texas twice. One of the games was a complete annihilation, and that was 7 or 8 years ago. That wasn't ancient history. Houston beat Oklahoma the last time they played them. They beat Baker Mayfield and company in Houston at Reliance Stadium. I don't think these Texas and Oklahoma are going to roll over anyone of these four.
Yeah, I don't either. I know I enjoyed watching Baker lose at Jack Trice Stadium in Ames when he was a senior.
Mm-hmm.
That was a delight. And I'm very much looking forward to Iowa State, who will be just absolutely not worth the press.
Yeah.
They will struggle very mightily this year. But they've got Oklahoma coming in on a Thursday night at the end of October. And the last 5 times they've played, it's all been one-score games. Oklahoma's 3-2 with 3 wins and 2 losses against Iowa State, and they've all been decided by a touchdown or less. So if Iowa State could keep it close, I'm just curious to see how their crowd will treat Oklahoma and then later Texas. When it'll be interesting, and not just in Ames. How are they going to be treated in Manhattan? How are they going to be treated when they go to Baylor? Because at some point, like you say, everybody's going to kind of turn the knives on them and say, all right, this has just been on paper. We know it's coming, but now we're down to the brass tacks. You guys really are leaving, and this is our last chance to put it to you. I think it really, as you mentioned, a college football fan, I think this just creates some great matchups and brings some attention to the Big 12. It's a great chance for the Big 12 to solidify yes, we are indeed a Power 5 conference. So I think it's a great opportunity here for them. If they're willing to go ahead and play hardball with the 2 that are leaving, they've got a great chance to make a statement for themselves.
Yeah, they really do. Because when you look at what grabs people's attention in college football from week to week, we know that the SEC has no issues with that. The Big Ten generally has no issues with that. But how many games during the course of a season in the Big 12 just captivate the nation? It's Texas and Oklahoma, regardless of their records. It's because of the rivalry. And then outside of that, it's somebody's got to be really good, jump up and play Oklahoma. And that's pretty much what it's been. There's not all this, the SEC, you can throw out a zillion matchups, and in the Big Ten, a little less, but still plenty. Or there's very few Big 12 matchups that every year people are just like, we have to see that game and can't wait for this game. And those 4 schools coming in don't hold that kind of leverage, but it's just a different vibe, a different feel. And because of all the possible animosity there that you just went through, it's just fun. It's just intriguing. Want to see it.
Yeah, they've got to sell themselves, and they've got a great chance to do it. And
Yep.
I know others are piled up, and to no one's surprise, the real MVP and JW got in first.
I know it.
So hang on, gang. Your chances are coming. Smash that like button, share, and don't forget about the Amazon link. Thanks, Mark.
Appreciate that, J-Dub. Have a good day. All right. We will keep it rolling. Love this topic. And of course, we can talk about anything in college football. Let's talk it up. You know, before I take this next call, this is the state of college football in Connecticut. And I'm not talking about UConn. We know that that's a disaster. Jim Mora, God help you. It's interesting that you would take on that challenge. But when all the college football publications came out the other day, it's been nice of whomever over the past couple of years to send me an Athlon's, or a Phil Steele sent me his publication for nothing. So I haven't ordered anything for a couple of years, not a long time. Then a couple of years ago, I'd go to the newsstand and I'd usually pick out my favorite one. And then since I've been doing this, I just grab them all. I'm like, okay, I want to stock up on all of them. I've been to Walgreens. I've been to a couple different grocery stores that you may not recognize. Walgreens, CVS. I went to a Barnes and Noble. They've got magazine racks that stretch longer than my wingspan, like 8 feet long magazine racks, both sides, from here to hundreds and hundreds of magazines. No college football magazines. None. Talk to the individual there with at the desk. Has no idea. Don't know what I'm talking about. So I'm ordering college football magazines. I got to get on that because I want to be reading them now. As Joey mentioned, you're our magazine, Mark, but no. I need information. I need rosters. I can look that stuff up online, of course, online, but it's just great to have that right in front of you. Connecticut. Yeah. They're worried about the Yankees and the Red Sox right now. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, George.
George.
Hey, Mark. It's George.
Hey. How are you?
How you doing, man?
I'm good. What's going on with you? The last time we spoke, you had a accident on your bike. Now, how are you feeling? What's going on?
I still have a friend come over every day and go to the grocery store for me and pick me up some dinner, but I'm getting better all in all. I mean, on Wednesday I have to go somewhere. I need to leave the house, so hopefully I'll be able to do it. I had
What
to cancel
is
my
going
appointment.
on? Do you guys hear those horns outside? Those alarms?
No.
Okay. My mic
No.
is unidirectional, so it doesn't pick that stuff up. But my goodness, it's like 18 different cars suddenly have their alarms going off. Okay, we're good now. So you have somebody coming over, helping you out.
Hopefully one of them wasn't your car.
Well, that's what I was thinking for a second, but I would recognize that. But
Exactly.
I thought
if
I was
you want
safe.
to run and check, we'll wait.
No, well, I think I'm good. We're good.
That's him, but I'm talking on my phone. My friend just walked over to see what the hell I'm doing over here. Who's he talking to? Hey, so I missed the whole damn thing. Tennessee, are they out of the College World Series of Baseball?
The Voice of College Baseball here. I don't know. They were down 7-3 according to the real MVP. I don't know. Other than
They
that.
lost 7-3. Someone said in the chat.
Okay, there you
Well,
go.
anyway, I don't know. It's hard not to laugh at that.
Yeah, and I guess they
I
haven't
think
been.
was it Jake?
Yep.
Yeah, they were. I read an article on them online. They were like the greatest baseball team in the history of the world, doing incredible shit that no one's ever done, and then they lose, and that's something. Oh, MVP just 24 just told them they're out. It's unbelievable. That is like, if you want to laugh at Tennessee, there's something to laugh about. because they were just on world beater, record breaking everything, and they lost. What a shame for them.
I got to say, as of a few minutes ago, I was completely unaware of the situation in the College World Series. If somebody would have said Tennessee's one of the best teams of all time or Tennessee sucks, I would have had no idea which was the truth.
I think it all started because Uncle Lou made a video about it the other day. And so it got intermixed with the college football thing. Yeah. And, it's Tennessee, so we have to talk about them. We can talk trash.
Yeah.
Several times in my life, I went to Barnes & Noble's, got myself a latte or whatever, Americana or something, sat down and read every football college magazine and took notes and then put the magazines back on the shelf. Maybe it's my fault that
Yes. No, George, I would like to blame you, but I'm blaming just the lack of college football interest in Connecticut, or the perceived lack of interest.
Yeah, I've just always loved Barnes and Noble. I mean, that's like yesteryear. It's never going to happen again. Those days are over. But just to go in there and peruse all those books, that's how I found the 48 Laws of Power. And when I buy a book, that's a big deal because I just don't do that. I read the damn thing, take notes, and put it back on the shelf. But I bought that one the first day. I'm like, this is a badass book, man.
Once again, this is the 48 Laws of Power.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure if any of the laws of power, how accurate they are, and I'm not into it from that point of view. It's the writing and how they did it. If you ever look at the book, you'll see it's more like a reference book because I don't think you could read it from beginning to end the way it's written. You have to see it to understand. By F and Jeter or Jelps and Effer or something, some weird named authors. By the way, it's the Big 12 that's the crybabies about losing Texas and Oklahoma now, right? I just want to get that right. This is Big 12.
Big 12. They're the crybabies.
Yeah.
Well, what about?
Yeah, they're crybabies. Now we lost Oklahoma. We lost Texas. Isn't that right?
Well, they did. I don't know what they're crying about. I don't know that they have cried about it. They had to try to salvage their conference.
It was JC or someone saying they should get even by punishing them or something.
Sure,
That's
they
not
should.
how it works. This is big boy. This is big boy football. The way you get even is you beat them in the playoffs and win 3 or 4 national titles out of 6 or something. That's what needs to happen. If you want to get even with the SEC or Texas and Oklahoma, beat them. Beat everybody. Win a championship. Pay your players more.
Well, I think in the interim, you put your new teams in the best position to succeed, and you put Oklahoma and Texas in the worst possible position because you're looking out for your conference. You do what's best for your conference. So
I think it'd be funny. I hope they do that.
You can only do so much. You can just mess with travel, and you can give them a difficult schedule, and you can do a few things.
Yep. Damn communist conspiracy against the Big 12. That's what it is. Who's checking up on these people? Is Russia involved? Hey, in golf just banned some golfers from the PGA because they signed with the Saudi Arabian Golf League. Did you see that? This is going on everywhere.
I did not. I have seen some recent decisions made by professional sports leagues that were pathetic and disgusting, but did not see that one.
Yeah, it's just a new day and age. Everything's falling apart at the seams. Saudi Arabia decided they're going to start a PGA tour of their own worldwide. And so a couple of PGA players signed with them. I mean, the Saudis are probably kicking in some good money, make it hard to say no, right? And the PGA immediately bans a couple of famous golfers from the PGA tour. They're like, okay, go play your stupid Saudi tournament, because the PGA has all the tournaments that matter of any import. But Saudi Arabia is thinking they're going to overtake the PGA Tour, and the PGA is like, no, you're not. We'll just kick every player out of our league that plays for you now. That signs with you. Like, you can play over there, but you're not playing in this league. So it's happening in every sport. The ones I keep up with, anyway. Oh my God! MVP 24 just said Phil Mickelson is one of the golfers that did that. So he's banned from the PGA now. Isn't that something?
This must have just come out. I would have thought I would have heard about this. Phil Mickelson?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. And Jason Osborne said those golfers are going to make some huge money in those Saudi tournaments. And that's true. That's why they signed up, because, Saudi Arabia is sitting on like 800 trillion in cash, do whatever they want. But it won't be the same as the PGA for the golfers.
So the Washington Post title, and we'll get back to college football here in about 30 seconds, says Phil Mickelson joined the Saudi-backed LIV Golf to help the world. What's that mean?
Yeah, he's big on that. He's big on helping the world.
Helping the world in what way?
By giving himself more money so he can tip better at restaurants.
Yeah, I'm not getting that at all. I'm going to have to read into that.
Okay. Richard Hawkins just said, I'm talking about irrelevant shit. He wants more college football talk. So what do you think about Florida and Utah and Georgia and Oregon? And never mind. That's such a generic question.
We will get to those items soon, George. Yeah.
Do you think Oregon has a chance?
Oh, they've got a chance. Sure, they've got a chance. They're all football players putting on pads and gear. They're going to run into each other. They've got a chance. They're a talented team. I'll give them a 10 to 15% chance.
I would have said they didn't have a chance last year against Ohio State,
Well, some people did. I did not say that. I quickly ran with the 15 points, and it did not surprise me. I still think Ohio State was better, and most people do, but I wasn't shocked. All right, George.
Do you think Notre Dame might join the Big Ten or the ACC? I can't see him joining the ACC.
If they're joining somebody, they're going to join the ACC. That's where all their sports teams are already committed.
It just doesn't make sense. Why would you join a weak league like that when you can join the Big Ten?
Yeah. Oh, it doesn't make sense. Notre Dame.
That would just diminish your
they're playing the likes of Virginia and Duke and Georgia Tech every year, as opposed to playing in the Big Ten. They're located in Big Ten territory. They have rivalries with Purdue and Michigan State. Their history aligns itself with the Big Ten, and they are a perfect fit football-wise for the Big Ten.
It would be exciting.
Oh, be great.
I would even like that. And I don't follow Notre Dame, but that would be exciting. I'd like to see them play that schedule instead of talking shit and playing ACC teams.
All right, George.
They always talk like they're one of the gang. Like, join the gang. Don't run off over to that junior varsity conference.
Well, they already have to a certain extent. They're already in bed with them. So, all right, George, I'm moving on. You take care of yourself. Get better. Feel better.
I am. Happy Sunday.
All righty. See ya. All right. Before we take this next call, let's make sure anything in the chat. Oh, yeah. Super chat. First one of the day coming in from Christopher Morgan. Thank you so much for this super chat contribution. Appreciate you so much. Off topic. I'm a Notre Dame diehard fan. Speak of the devil, alum grad since 2004. With the way college football is changing and Notre Dame's TV contract ending in 2025, do you see them joining the ACC or the Big Ten? Which would you like to see? I think the ACC with West Virginia is, I guess, the likely candidate. Okay. Notre Dame has something like 14 sports that belong to the ACC. They have signed a contract in football with the ACC through 2036 or something in that range. I think it's even more complex and convoluted and attached and connected than that between Notre Dame and the ACC. I think it's going to be difficult for Notre Dame to detach from the ACC. I believe that Notre Dame, the powers that be in the football program and at Notre Dame, would like to maintain independence. It gives them a certain cachet to not be tied down to 8 or 9 games out of 12 against the likes of, if they belong to the ACC, they'd have to up it to 8 games, maybe potentially 9. And then you eliminate the possibilities of, they're always going to play, at least the way things stand right now. And we know traditions get broken every year, but Notre Dame always plays USC, Stanford, Navy. Well, they're not going to play those 3 non-conference games every year. So somebody's going to go. I don't know that anyone's going to cry over the loss of the Notre Dame Navy series, but it is tradition. But Notre Dame broke its contract and broke its series with Michigan and with Michigan State and Purdue. So no tradition is beyond reproach. But Notre Dame's so heavily involved with the ACC. That's who Notre Dame would join. Who should Notre Dame join from a football standpoint? As I just pointed out to George, the Big Ten. Hands down, Notre Dame belongs in the Big Ten. Their football history aligns in the Big Ten. Their rivalries are in the Big Ten. Their geography puts them smack dab in the middle of the Big Ten. Christopher Morgan, thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. Much appreciated. All right. Next up on the Voice of College Football. Hello.
Hey, Mark. How you doing today, man?
DeAndre.
Hey, Mark. DeAndre, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I got a question for you. First off, I want to talk about this Notre Dame thing. I think we looked it up one time before. I think Georgia Tech has played Notre Dame a lot more than Michigan. I can't remember our conversation about it because it was a few years ago we had this conversation. But I think Georgia Tech and Notre Dame had played a lot back in the day, and we had talked about it. And I got my point. My point is that, they had a thing with Georgia Tech for a little bit. For those old school people, Georgia Tech was really good. But let me ask you this. Let's say Clemson, Florida State, and Miami is at their best.
Mm-hmm.
I give it to Ohio State. But traditionally, if you put those 3 at their best, and Ohio State, Michigan, who would you say? Penn State, maybe? Would be the third squad. Would you say Clemson is just as good? Would you say the ACC would be just as good as the Big Ten would?
At their best, all 3 of them, like if you took Clemson at its best, which is 2015 through 20, you took Florida State at its best,
Okay.
which is like the late 80s through the 90s, and Miami, wherever you want to take them, in the late 80s, early 90s, 2000, 2001. Like, you get to take all of at individual at different peaks.
What I'm talking about, let's say you look at them as like Miami. They put a whole lot more money into their football team. Their stadiums and all of that other stuff, recruiting area, all of that. Wouldn't Clemson, Florida State, or Florida be just as powerful as Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State? And the reason why I say that,
sure,
because of what we done talked about before, the population is moving down south. What made Penn State, Pitt, and all of them so good back in the day, the population was up north. And like I look at Ann Arbor, you got Detroit right there who had the car companies. Now, the car companies are gone. The coals are gone. So everybody, coal mines are gone. So most of the population has moved back down south. So if you take facilities, recruiting, and all of that, I would think that Notre Dame would be better off joining the ACC than they would do with the Big Ten, because all the recruiting is down south, and those players want to be seen on TV or play in front of their families. And yes, the Notre Dame tradition is great, and they'll do a great job. But we get to play at Notre Dame Stadium. Every now and then you get to play Michigan. More than likely, they'll keep the Southern Cal Robbers. But the reason why I heard that Notre Dame does not want to join the ACC is because they want to have a game in California every year. That's one of the reasons why they didn't move full time in the ACC. So that's what I'm saying. I think the ACC, on paper, is a better conference in the future than the Big Ten.
Oh,
now,
on paper in the future,
better.
theoretically, yes, it is. I've said that many times, that the ACC has a huge opportunity to increase its play, improve its brand, and be a much better football conference because of the population shift in the future. Hasn't happened. They should be right now, but they're not. But you're right, Notre Dame.
And I think the reason why they're not, and I brought this up to you before, ACC has more private academic schools. Like, I'll give you an example, Duke and Wake Forest. And I know people don't like to take this and believe it, but look at them. They're one of the top private schools in the whole country. And they do have to maintain a selection. What started at Carolina, when people say, hey, wait a minute, we're letting all these players in, and they can't meet the academic standard. That's how Carolina got in trouble, because the lady went to the So they don't want to, I know it sounds stupid to us as football fans, but academics does play a little part into how they recruit these players. Georgia Tech's another one. I did a video on Georgia Tech, how Georgia Tech and UCLA, they're in good areas for recruiting. However, because of their academic standards, I think that's what holds them back. And people say, well, what about the 90s? It's a different time than what it was back then. I mean, maybe you got away with a lot more than what you could in the 90s. And outside of Vanderbilt, what school in the SEC, not knocking the SEC, but all these are great schools. They provide great education. But which one of them are Duke and Wake Forest level outside of Vanderbilt? And if we want to go there, Georgia Tech also. Because my cousin played at Georgia Tech in the 90s. Virgil Johnson played fullback. He was with Joe Hamilton. And he said he was a criminal justice major. They still require him to take capital. So I'm like, wow. I'm just bringing that up because I know a lot of people like to hate on the ACC, and I don't really understand why. Sometimes when you look at the population, it's gonna take years to go into that, but I think ACC will be fine in the next few years. I think the Notre Dame will make a better business decision by coming to the ACC than they would the Big Ten. But back to y'all subject about the Big 12. I love the new Big 12. I think people slip on how powerful BYU is. I know you lose to Oklahoma and Texas, who are name brand schools, but BYU got to be up there with the population that they go to because of the Mormons. And I think Houston is really good. That's a fast growing city. It's the third or fourth biggest city in the country right now. And then you have Central Florida, which I think is the biggest college in the West College. I'm not saying they upgraded. The Texas, Oklahoma are traditional powers, but I think Texas, Oklahoma put themselves in a worse situation by going to the SEC. I can't see anybody in the SEC running through it, going undefeated like they have in the past years, with the amount of talent that they have in there. And depending on how the college football playoffs work in the future, that might have hurt them. But they won the national championship. But that's a grueling schedule. And they was already having trouble with Arkansas, and Oklahoma was already having trouble once they got into it in the playoffs. So
a couple points here,
that helps,
DeAndre. So a couple points. So when you say that the ACC and you talk about the academic standards, I don't have the answer to this question, but the Big Ten has rather high academic standards as well. I don't know how the two collectively compare, but I got to think that the Big Ten is competitive with any conference from top to bottom academically.
But I was comparing the South part of it with the SEC and the ACC. Because I know, Boston College, Syracuse, and Pitt is up in the north, but most of the ACC schools are down south.
Yeah.
So that was my point on that one. And look at Miami. Miami has one of the best academic schools, but I don't think Miami pushes academics like Duke does. But I say that I hear how expensive it is for somebody to go to Miami. That's why they didn't have a big, that money pile like you see at some schools, because it wasn't. A lot of people didn't go to that particular school because how expensive it was. Because most of the money comes from people raising money outside of the athletic department, people that love their football program. Miami probably has the biggest fan base where nobody actually could afford to go to that school. And, I'm not trying to be funny, but it's true. That's why Duke don't really care about football. I mean, I know they did good on a cut cliff, like, 73, 66, but that was manipulation of the schedule also. Duke go play just like Vanderbilt. Duke wouldn't go to play in the ACC. I mean, the SEC. They'll get smashed every month, every year, every weekend. So that's why I'm moving there. I know that. Don't get me wrong. I know what's it called, the AAU of schools.
Yeah.
I know a lot of Big Ten schools. The Nebraska almost got kicked out because of their academics. From what I understand, or that some people complained about it. So, but that was my point about that. I know that Big Ten has great academics, but I was just comparing how the ACC has that issue. But I think the Big 12 gonna be fine, man. I like that lineup without Texas and Oklahoma. I just think Texas and Oklahoma put themselves in a worse situation when it comes to the playoff situation and winning more national championships. I mean, Texas right now, I know they're picking up on recruiting and stuff like that, but they're really struggling. I mean, I think Clemson has got 4 players out of Texas that are 4-8 players. 4-star players. So that's just ridiculous. I'm sure Clemson gets a lot of players out there anyway, but that's just amazing that they let those players get away. Another question I have for you, Mark. Why do you think all these 5-stars keep going to Georgia, but they're not successful? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm talking about back quarterbacks. I should make myself. Why do 5-star quarterbacks keep going to Georgia and they're not successful?
So who's not been successful? Justin Fields. Who was the one that went? Jacob Park. He was a 5-star, correct?
Right. Was Eason was too, right?
That's who I was thinking of, not Jacob Park. Jacob Eason, who went to Washington. Jacob Park went to Iowa State. Jacob Eason, was not successful as a 5-star. Justin Fields was not there. And now we've got Brock Vandegrift in the room, along with he's the Gunnar Stockton, I believe, is a 5-star. I think they've got 2 5-stars in the room, but they have yet to be given a shot. So we're working off 2 guys.
But then you got, what's the guy named Manning's son?
Who?
Nephew. Manning. Allegedly he's leaning towards signing there over Alabama.
Okay.
And but my point is, and I know Clemson signed the guy out of Texas. I can't think of his name off the top of my head right now. But what I'm saying is, they haven't had a good track record of developing quarterback to the next future, to the next level. So what I'm asking is, why you there? So that you was all lineman, defensive line, type of defense here or running back, you want to go to Georgia. Now, but you got 3 5-stars and a guy that was a walk-on who might not even get in there. And Daniels didn't have success. I know you said that was probably because of injuries, but I'm just looking at it. It's like, why would you keep going to Georgia? I mean, Florida look like they might be pretty good upcoming if you want to play in the SEC. But I just can't understand it why all of them are stood up in that area.
Well, DeAndre, we're a bit losing you, but I will address that here in just a second. I appreciate you calling. Okay, I think we lost DeAndre. All right. So why does Georgia continue to attract 5-star quarterbacks? Well, again, we came up with 4. 2 have had their careers play out. The other 2 are in the quarterback room right now. I don't know that that's that substantial to be addressing quarterback failures at Georgia from 5 stars. 2 didn't work out, but they worked out elsewhere. Jacob Eason, did he get an NFL look? And then Justin Fields did just fine for himself elsewhere. Georgia's recruiting elite talent everywhere. I know the quarterback position's a bit different, but what they can show a quarterback is that they can show him, well, we have elite, talented wide receiver. We've got a great offensive line. And yeah, there might be, you would think, some type of issue in terms of translating the NFL success, making that connection. Who's the last Georgia quarterback who played at Georgia, not Justin Fields, who played at Georgia, who not just made an NFL roster like Jake Fromm, but played in the NFL? Aaron Murray just barely cup of coffee in the NFL, just stuck around. Who played? Matthew Stafford, of course. Did Stafford and Murray connect? I think they were that was the handoff from Matt Stafford to Aaron Murray. So that makes Matthew Stafford the last successful Georgia quarterback at the next level. So I don't know, DeAndre. I just know that Georgia's recruiting out of its mind everywhere. So quarterback's just included. It's a different type position because there's only one guy on the field. And they've had 2 failures at Georgia. Those players moved on, did fine elsewhere, especially Justin Fields. I would think that a 5-star quarterback would be a bit concerned. Now, if there were no other options available, that would be one thing because, again, elite offensive line, elite talent at wide receiver, but maybe not given the type of coaching and quarterback development that you would receive at Ohio State. Look at Alabama's track record with quarterbacks. The last 2 have been lights out, ridiculous. Really, the last 3, if you take Jalen Hurts, who's now turned into a starting NFL quarterback. I didn't think he had it in him, but with Hurts, Tua, and Mac Jones, the last 3 for Bama. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's McD Sports Score. How are you doing?
Hey, McD. What's going on?
Pretty good. I want to talk about the expansion of the Big 12 happening in 2023.
Okay.
So, I looked at the Big 12 expanding. Obviously, it looks like Texas and Oklahoma is going to be in the Big 12 with the new teams for 2 years. But after the new teams leave, I don't think the Big 12, I wouldn't consider the Big 12 a Power 5 conference after Texas and Oklahoma leave because they don't really have that big-time brand. So what I would do to buff it up is go after Memphis and Boise State if you're the Big 12. I think if they do that, I think they could sit there and say they have 14 teams and they can compete as a Power 5 conference.
So you're going to attack the problem by sheer volume. I just think you're doing You're repeating what they gained with UCF and the others. Those four. So I don't think that helps you at the top. Boise State and who? Memphis?
Yep.
Yeah, I get where you're going, and it's not an easy problem to solve because there's only so many elites in the country, but Memphis and Boise State are not going to take the world by storm at that level. If you're just, again, looking to expand a really good conference into just more good teams, then have at it. I enjoy the football, but to make an impact on the playoff, I don't think that accomplishes your goal, adding Memphis and Boise State.
Well, another thing about the Big 12, if you take away Texas and Oklahoma, I don't know if I told you this, this past season, the new Big 12 would have had one team in the playoffs and two other teams in New Year's Six bowls. And those two teams that were in New Year's Six bowls were Baylor and Oklahoma State, and they both won. And obviously Cincinnati was in the playoffs. So I think in my opinion, the way the Big 12 looks, I don't think BYU is going to be a big brand. I think Baylor has a chance to be a big brand as well. But I think they need to get more teams in there to just expand the footprint, or to get more good programs in there to make it a more quality conference, because a lot of the teams we have in there, in my opinion, are typically 8-9 win teams that aren't gonna be at the top every year. They don't have a consistent 10, 11, 12 win team program in there that could do it consistently.
That's the problem. It's a good football conference if you just want to watch football with top 25 to 40 teams in the country. But I don't see, none of those remaining teams have ever been elite for any period of time, aside from one season. TCU, one season, etc. Baylor, one season. Oklahoma State. I'm talking about the existing Big 12 plus the 4 new members.
So, yeah, I was just thinking, like, go as big as possible. If I'm the Big 12, I would just go as big as possible and just get a bunch of good football programs in there. So I was thinking a Memphis, a Boise State, and then maybe even get more after that. Those are the only two that came up in my mind that were still, I think, teams that could succeed in the Power 5 right away. That are still considered a group of fives in the American and Mountain West.
Well, you have to consider this too, that the more teams you add, the more you fracture the revenue to each team. And Boise State's not bringing in all sorts of attraction from the Northwest. You know, there's not a whole lot of TV homes up there. And then the other thing you got to consider is every time you add more teams to the conference, there are more losses to be had. So, of course, the conference is going to go 500, but the larger you make the conference, the more probability that those teams are going to accumulate losses that are going to spread out amongst everyone and make it difficult for somebody to emerge as an elite.
I don't disagree with that. The only pushback I would have about that comment, Boise State, is that it is one of the fastest growing areas, Boise, Idaho.
Yes,
right
it is.
now. But
yeah, a lot of California people going there.
Yeah, but and I mean, you're gonna have 12 teams basically. Once Oklahoma and Texas lead, I mean, the only other conference that's going to have 12 is the Pac-12. So, and you already been down the whole rabbit hole how Boise State will never be in the Pac-12 because of academics. So, I just think it's a good move if you're the Big 12, go to 14 and get Memphis and Boise State. And
I think you could really have a big football conference. You might not have the game of the week every week. You might only have the game of the week once or twice a year. But I do think if you go to 14, I think we could definitely make the argument it's a Power 5 conference because there'll be someone there every year. Because one of those teams will pop off and go 11-1 or 12-0 every year. And you basically will be viewed as a Power 5 conference at that point.
Well, McD, I'm not in love with your plan. Again, if you're building a larger conference that's a really good football playing conference, then I'm in love with your plan. If you want more 7-5, 8-4 teams to be playing, then I like your plan. But if you're trying to position yourself for a college football playoff, you're going to bring more losses to the conference. You're going to spread out more losses, and those two teams aren't going anywhere.
Okay. I mean, I just kind of thought
Sure.
there on the fly and thought
I hear you.
maybe get your reaction on it.
I got you.
But I would like to see Memphis and Boise State move to the Power 5, especially Boise State. But just an idea for the Big 12 if once Texas and Oklahoma leave to keep it at 14 since it looks like they're going to be playing at 14 for a year or two.
Yeah, I think Texas and Oklahoma are going to move up their date of entry into the SEC as well.
You think they're going to be starting the SEC play in 2023?
I'd be guessing. I don't know. I just don't see them hanging out for another 3 football season. They already hung out as a lame duck for a season. Now we're going to do this for another 3 seasons. I just don't think it's going to happen. When
I can see it.
When there are agreements made that divorce of sorts, people don't usually like to stick around. They want to get on with their new life. They want to get on with their new situation.
I can definitely see that. And with Oklahoma and Texas going to the SEC, I think Oklahoma could be a consistent 9-3 program in the SEC. The way Texas is right now, I agree with you. I know you said you might be giving up on Steve Sarkisian too soon. He was a downgrade from I forget the guy's name that was the head coach before.
Tom Herman.
And those sorts of Tom Herman. That's who it was. I want to say Tom Helton for some reason, but I thought it was a downgrade. So I definitely agree with you about giving up too early on Steve Sarkisian. I don't think Texas is going to win more than like 7 games this year. So, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. And they certainly don't want to put the Terps back on the schedule. They want to stay away from Maryland. Don't want to mess around.
You know what we had?
Yeah, the mighty Terps.
You know exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. You know exactly what would happen there. Maybe Maryland should join the SEC. So
yeah,
it'll be. Yeah. But I don't see that happening. I think Maryland's going to be in the Big Ten for a really long time, which upsets me a little bit because, as I've said before, I think Maryland should have never left the ACC. But it is what it is. But anyways, Mark, just want to give you that thought. Thanks for taking my call. Go Terps. We're going to be Buffalo on the Big Ten Network on week 1 at noon.
I will not be watching, but I will take your call that night. You can tell me all about it.
Well, you might be, Mark, because I looked at the 12 o'clock slate. It's pretty weak, the 12 o'clock slate.
First weekend of the season? Really?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's there's no. I mean, the only Power 5 versus Power 5 matchup is Boston College and Rutgers.
Yeah, that's certainly not going to move the needle. Okay, we'll check out week 1 at noon. Okay. See here.
Pretty weak. See you, Mark.
All right, McD, have a good one. Week 1 on that Saturday. So at noon, Buffalo, Maryland. Yeah, he's right. North Carolina, Appalachian State. The Appalachian State crew pulled off an upset there in that matchup a couple of years ago. NC State and East Carolina could be an okay game. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line? I think I killed a call there. Hello, who's on the line?
Lomansky, Mark.
Lomansky, give me 2 seconds here. I believe I killed another call. So please forgive me and call back. Lomansky, what's going on?
Well, I should talk about the Big 12, but you've got so much Big 10 knowledge, and I can kill two birds with one stone. Derek Miller had a question about Nebraska's first game is Northwestern. How do you think they'll play? Maybe you and I can round around and help Derek with his question too. But I've been looking around the prognosticators, what's going to happen in the Big 10, and I wish I could remember who the source was, but it's kind of interesting that they're acknowledging your respect for Minnesota, and that prognosticator said they'll threaten to win it. They were so down on Wisconsin's quarterbacking, just kind of shocked me. I didn't know that Mertz had his just haters, and they had Wisconsin down a few slots more than I got them, so I had to really assess my intelligence. Really down on Indiana. I thought Indiana would get tossed in the trash with their talent. And the team they really liked was Purdue. And I was trying to envision Ohio State for the Big Ten championship against Purdue. And I'm like, maybe the coaching would be very interesting, but wouldn't Ohio State just shred them offensively? I mean, Purdue's not that strong. Who do you see as the best Big Ten matchup maybe for the championship of the Big Ten next fall? And this prognosticator had Nebraska losing one game. And I guess to turn a program around that, I wish I could remember the source, Mark. I knew you were going to answer that.
One game?
Maybe if I can. Exactly. They had them Nebraska losing one game.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm not going to say that it cannot
really
happen, but I want somebody.
I just can't believe. Yeah.
Well, somebody serve up the example of a 3-9 team that went 11-1 the next year. I can come up with one example. That would be the 2013 Auburn Tigers, who went from 3-9 to within 10 seconds of winning a national championship. So it can be done. Wow. Nebraska to me is the most, what would you call them? A stock market team in terms of, do you buy, do you sell?
Penny stock?
They're the most, yeah, they're the most unpredictable. They're the most unpredictable team.
I just got the Cornhusker fans mad as hell at me by saying that.
That's all right. This is good for the show, Lomansky. Whatever sacrifices you need to make for us to gain more interest, then we are all for that. I think they're the most unpredictable team because I expect them to be better. But, I've got my sights set pretty closely on everybody else. Now, the other intriguing team to me is Penn State. So they should make a leap from 7-6 last year. Those are, though, I think the two biggest wild card teams in the conference.
So transfer portal to me, and I'm probably not modern enough, and I go way back to my own experience. My varsity basketball team in high school had 2 6'5" players, a good guard, and we were a small rural town, and we thought we'd go to the state tournament. And we ended up 500 because they didn't have chemistry. You know, think of the Bengals quarterback to wide receiver chemistry that transferred really nicely from college to pro. I'm going to predict that Nebraska's will take a couple years to mesh it all together. So I don't see them. I see them winning, but I don't see them winning the West. I'm hoping Penn State just flounders. probably because they have so much talent, they don't perform. I hope they just floundered. And then Derek wanted to know how you saw Nebraska's first game with Northwestern, how that would play out.
Nebraska's improved, and Northwestern should be improved just because they were so lousy last year. And of course, Nebraska just annihilated Northwestern. Nebraska's got better athletes. If they can get Northwestern playing their type of game as they did last year, then it turns into a track meet and Nebraska blows them away. I don't think they're going to blow them away. I think the travel kind of beats down both teams a little bit. It's a week one situation where they're both trying to figure things out to a certain extent. Nebraska is brand new on offense and defense. And so I think that Nebraska most likely, and of course, this is not my final prediction, but I think Nebraska wins comfortably, but not in a fashion that does not make for an interesting game. I think Pat Fitzgerald, with a whole summer to prepare his team, and maybe I'm going up against history here because actually Pat Fitzgerald's teams typically do better. His good teams do better as the season goes on. They gel, they come together. And if you look at some of their teams, as you well know, that have gone to Big Ten championship games, they've lost embarrassing games in September against the likes of Akron and Duke and others. And then 6 weeks later, they're gunning for a Big Ten championship game appearance. So I'm going to go against that track record to say, well, Pat Fitzgerald's had the entire offseason to prepare a team strategically and in terms of conditioning and development, but also to prepare their psyche for 56-7 to get some payback. So maybe he's using that as motivation. And I think on paper, Nebraska wins as a much better team, but I think it's going to be kind of close. When I say comfortable, I don't mean blowout. I mean Nebraska wins by 10 points, but it's a good game.
I really enjoyed your simulation game between Iowa and Iowa State transferring into your Big 12 theme today. What did you think of that simulation?
Oh, my simulation. I don't have anything to do with those.
It was kind of interesting. They had 3 turnovers for each side, and it was a close game. It was a 9 or 10 point game.
Yeah, but I know nothing about those.
They put your name on it, so that's pretty good. Somebody's working for you. You delegated nicely there.
Well, our buddy over there at SD1 Sports, he loves to do the simulations and asked if we could post those, and I said absolutely. A lot of people like them. I don't, but other people like them. So I'm not here to produce content for myself. So, yeah, people like them.
What I'm hoping in the Big 12 is that, what they can do is kind of what USC tried to do, is to get a better coach in. The transfer portal is a new tool. Oregon has had some coaching changes, but I think there's still quality up there. Utah's got a good program. I think the Big 12 has to either get better coaches or coach better. Iowa State's a good example. They had Clemson on the ropes in a bowl game. That would have been good for the Big 12 to be Clemson. And then, of course, their quarterback recruiting wasn't good enough, and they had a quarterback make big mistakes down the line. So I think the key to the Big 12 is to, recruit better, have good coaches in place, and try to have a race with the Pac-12 who can elevate their prestige the fastest.
I am with you, Lemansky. Anything else, sir?
No, I'll let you go and listen to the rest of the show.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for the support.
Talk to you later.
Have a good one. Thanks.
You bet.
Our guy Lemansky, Iowa fan. Iowa show Tuesday. We had a great show last week. Steve Dace joined us to talk Iowa, Michigan. We know the game's not forever, but we're doing a series with all of our team channels, all the ones that contain team live streams, where we're bringing on media from the schedule, from the opposing teams. And so we're running through all these schedules for all these teams. So again, Iowa, Michigan, great look at both programs, courtesy Corey Bratta and Steve Dace on last week's show. Please check it out. Go to the Iowa channel, look up last week's Iowa Hawkeyes live show. Again, Steve Dace, Michigan podcast, Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Great conversation on not just, we weren't matching the teams up much because the game's going to be played October 1st. But great look at the programs. So check it out. And we've got our Iowa show coming up every Tuesday at 4:30 Central, 5:30 Eastern. Next up here at the Voice of College Football, who's on the line?
Hey, this is Richard.
Richard, what's going on?
Yeah, how you doing? I kind of like to keep this Big 12 focused here. I see that it's hard to even get people to talk about the Big 12 and stay on topic with the Big 12 because basically with Oklahoma and Texas leaving, it's pretty much irrelevant, to be honest. I do see – now my question to you is, Mark, what is it for Oklahoma and Texas? Their brands are as big as anybody's in the SEC, right? Are they not at a point where they make as much money as anybody in the SEC?
Well, they don't currently in the Big 12.
Well, and I'm not talking about conference, but I'm talking about Texas has a Big 12 network.
Sure.
I'm talking about from a total profitability, and like Clemson in the ACC. I just don't see how moving to the SEC, which a lot of people have made the point, how making your brand, where now it's at the top of the hill, to making it mediocre. And won't that hurt your brand long term as opposed, you understand my point?
Oh, I understand your point. It's a good point. And, yeah, this can break either way. But Texas and Oklahoma are choosing to be in the best conference with the best brand for a conference and make the most money. When I say make the most money, we mean that the
payouts to every school.
Yeah, the payouts for each school as of 2 or 3 years ago was like $70 million for the Big Ten and the SEC, all the way down to like 28 to 30 million for the Pac-12, and the Big 12 was somewhere around 36 or 38 million, something like that. Somebody sent me something just today or yesterday that had updated figures with the Big 12 doing a little bit better than that. But anyway, it's a substantial gap between the SEC and the Big 10 and everybody else, including the Big 12. Well, the value of the SEC goes up considerably with the Oklahoma-Texas editions. Even though they have to distribute the money 2 more times, those estimations are like 93 to 95 million per team, per school.
Mm-hmm. But it's also hurting college football geographically.
Oh, absolutely. You're right. That was my
super conference.
Yep. That was my first response when all this happened. I said, this isn't good for college football. It's good for the SEC. It's good for Oklahoma and Texas. It's not good for college football.
Yeah, it's not. And so an example I would give you is Nebraska leaving the Big 12, formerly Big 8, to go to the Big 10, where they've been complete crap since they've been in the Big 10. And I also want to say, anybody who thinks Nebraska is going to lose one game needs their head examined.
Oh, my word. Yes.
I can't believe anybody could get any credibility with that statement. Scott Frost has been the biggest bomb of all the coaches that were hired 4 or 5 years ago. So anyways, my next question, since we're keeping it Big 12 focused, is who are the teams with this vacuum of Oklahoma and Texas leaving? Who are the teams that are who can step up and dominate this conference and improve their brand to where maybe they're like a Clemson is in the ACC, until an ACC does have all the potential in the world to be on an equal par with the SEC if Florida State, Miami, and a couple other schools in there, can up their brand to get it where it needs to be, where it has been in the past. So my point is I guess I'm asking, who is it that can really fill that vacuum? I don't think BYU the middle of the road team that can have success, but they're not going to be a team that will dominate the conference year in and year out. My guess is right now it would be Baylor would probably be that team. I think TCU has helped by Oklahoma and Texas leaving the conference, even possibly Texas Tech. So I was wanting your opinion about that. And I was also, I guess because it's just simply about the money now, which makes the game less interesting to me every year because it's becoming something that college football was not, which is now semi-pro football. You would think schools like Nebraska would want to jump into the Big 12 because you would think they would want to build their brand successful and they would be interested in winning championships. Well, it seems winning championships has taken a back seat to money. Iowa, maybe they're a school that would think about bolting the Big 10 and going into the Big 12. And Arkansas and Missouri, Arkansas especially, would be a perfect fit into the Big 12. And you can't tell me right now if Arkansas was in the Big 12, they're not guaranteed right now the second best team in the Big 12 and could possibly win the Big 12. What's your opinion about Arkansas if that was to happen?
All right. Let's back all the way up to Nebraska. So quick note on Nebraska. Yes, you were citing Nebraska as an example of a team, a school, a program that left one conference, went to another, and it's not worked out. You're absolutely right from a football standpoint, but the school's making more money. Why does the school exist? The school exists, hopefully, ultimately, to acquire students and educate them for real life in the world. So the school exists for other things, and the school is either benefiting from the football program financially, or it's being sapped by the football program financially and still believes football is important enough from a prestige standpoint that they'll support the football program. I don't exactly know. I've seen stats.
Are you trying to tell me Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Texas are strapped for cash?
No. That's not what I'm saying.
So it's greed that it hurts their fan bases. Nebraska is starving to have a team that can be in competition and win again.
Sure, but they're making more money in the Big 10.
I got that, which to me, it means it's nothing about winning is really irrelevant. It's whoever we put the stamp on, whoever's winning, but money is what it's all about, and that's why college football, in my opinion, is taking a downturn. Well,
you got to think that the institution's making a decision. We're moving to another conference. Are they have to be thinking about finances. They're running an institution and they're trying to budget. They're trying to support various components of the university too. So they have to be thinking finances, not just can we win a championship here? Can we win a championship there? Nebraska was fully capable.
Yeah, they got to support all the sports. They got to support all the sports that can't football. Makes all the money for the sports that don't get any cash, and we have to fund sports like swimming where we have transgenders. That's what we have to fund, stuff
Mhm.
like that. That's what's important. I'm going off the rails here, but
I understand your point, but the law is the law, and they have to fund all those sports. Yes, they do have to fund this, but they don't have a choice. They do have to fund all the sports.
I guess what I'm saying, Mark, is we know that Oklahoma and Texas, these schools are not hurting for money. We know this.
Absolutely not.
It's like, okay, we want, instead of a 50 million, we want 100 million. You see what I'm trying to say? It's pure greed. And it's hurting the game. It's geographically, we got teams that don't belong in this conference over here. And it's nonsensical. I mean, you can still make money and have the game be the best product it can be. I don't care about the most money. I care about having the best sport and the best game there was.
Okay.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense, but you got to understand the interests of individual schools, programs, all that, versus that's why there needs to be some type of overarching system, structure, commissioner to look out for the good of the sport. That's what happens in professional sports. The individuals teams, they want to do what's best for them. They should. But there's a structure in place to say, nope, you can't do that. You can't do that. We're going to put this system in place to hold you in check, because you can't just all be running and doing whatever you want. You've got to stay within the structure, because we've got to be looking out for the good of the entire game. We don't have that in college football. So everybody gets to run around and do whatever they want, schedule whoever they want, run to whatever conference that's going to accept them. They get to do that because nobody's running the sport. So I don't fault Oklahoma and Texas for leaving for the SEC for more money. Who's to say that? So to my next point, so I pointed out Nebraska. I didn't get to finish my point, but you can argue a ton that it was a good move to go to the Big Ten. You can argue that it was a bad move to go to the Big Ten. They hadn't won a conference championship in 10 years anyway in the Big 12. They're not winning one anytime soon, it appears, in the Big Ten. But the thing that hurt Nebraska, that's a different situation with Oklahoma and Texas leaving a conference, is Nebraska left its recruiting footprint. They had a lot of ties to Texas, and they left that because they went to a conference that has no connection to Texas. Oklahoma and Texas are not doing that. Texas is in Texas. All they have to do is look at their neighbor, their rival from the old Southwest Conference and now the Big 12, Texas A&M, and see, you know what? It may help us in recruiting. It will help us in recruiting. Oklahoma, it will help them in recruiting to go to the SEC. And, a conference in the Big 12 that had 0 first-round selections in the NFL draft last year and this year, 0. Texas and Oklahoma now go to the SEC, and they're going to be able to sell an SEC decal to recruits. They are helping themselves. Now, is the schedule going to be too tough for them? You could argue that, yes. But is it going to be more lenient? Is it going to be more lenient in regards to their entry into a college football playoff of 12 teams, that they go 9-3 in the SEC and can make a playoff, versus going 9-3 in the Big 12? No way. Forget it. You're not getting in. I think they've made, if you're not looking at college football as a whole, if you're looking at Oklahoma and Texas, they have made a good decision to go to the Big 12. That's the reason they went to the SEC. Didn't poach them. They went to the SEC and said, we want to be in.
Yeah, you remember Bob Stoops when he was saying that the Big 12 was on par with the SEC?
Yeah, well, obviously coaches say things to build up their own conference. So Bob Stoops knows better than that.
Well, Bob Stoops was a great coach. My point is that people should know a bunch of baloney when they're being handed or being told. And this is all, unfortunately, about greed. Ultimately, that's why these schools make these decisions. They're not beneficial to the fan bases. They're beneficial to the schools and making the money. And somewhere,
you don't think
the destruction of.
You don't think if I took a poll of Oklahoma fans
know
and
what
Texas fans as to whether they want to join the SEC, I bet it's pushing 90% want to join the SEC.
What do you think that'll be in 10 years? What do you think that'll be in 10 years?
I have no idea what it'll be in 10 years. I know that right now your argument is serving the fan base. The fan bases want to go to the SEC.
Well, do you think Nebraska's fan base is happy with being in the Big Ten when they used to be? Let's forget about the last so many years. They're not even competitive anymore. To be honest with you, let's be real. Nebraska's not even competitive.
It's a different situation. They left their recruiting base. Nebraska left its recruiting base. Oklahoma and Texas are enhancing. They're enhancing their recruiting base. Great defensive football players don't want to go play in the Big 12. That's obvious by the NFL draft. Great defensive players don't want to play in the Big 12. They want to play in the SEC.
So this is what we're stuck with in college football.
Yeah, because nobody's running the sport. Because nobody's running the sport.
So when you have the Pac-12 is pretty much irrelevant as a conference as overall as well, just as much as the Big 12, if not more.
When you say relevant, you're talking about
irrelevant.
Yes. When you talk about relevance, you're talking about winning a national championship. That's your basis of relevance, right? I'm just making it clear what we're talking about.
Football. Yeah, as a football fan, yes.
Yeah, you want to win.
They're irrelevant outside of USC, and USC will be relevant again very soon because they hired a top-flight coach, not a drunk, and a run-it-all-mouth kind of coach. So, yeah, USC is fixing to be a huge brand again, but I've heard rumors that they would be looking to bulk and join one of these super conferences possibly. Maybe Oregon has worked their way into the possibility of joining a league like that. Then you're left with what happens to all the little sisters of the poor, I guess, is what we would call them at this point, your Iowa State, your Kansas State. I wouldn't consider Oklahoma State that. Oklahoma State's really probably hurt more by they don't bring a lot of TV. They have over the last 10 years, they have one of the best college football programs as far as wins and losses. And I saw a stat, they had one of the best records against top 25 competition in the last 10 years. But
most of that's in the Big 12.
What's the incentive for USC to stay in the Pac-12 and Oregon as well? So then you're left with Arizona State, schools you care nothing about like Cal, and Washington could be possibly a brand, I guess. They hadn't been a real brand for a while. They've had their pockets of real good success, but nothing here as of late. They didn't make the one playoff. And Washington State.
Well, Richard,
Oregon
we're going to have to
State.
let you go here pretty soon. We could talk about this for hours. The last comment I'll make is that I don't see USC bolting for anywhere unless they have someone to go with them. At least one school, if not three schools, to go with them. They're not going to the Big Ten, for as attractive as USC is, I don't think they're going to have a satellite school out on the West Coast. And maybe the Big Ten would make that move, but I can't see USC saying, we're going to make all our trip. We're going to cut off all of our rivalries and play exclusively in the Big Ten. But USC and UCLA, or USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon, absolutely. It's just like, and I'm not going to run through the logic, but it turned out to be true. I said the same thing about UCF, BYU, Houston, and Cincinnati coming together as a package to the Big 12. That none of them would have said, with the Big 12 being vulnerable with 8 teams at the time, once they lost Oklahoma and Texas, that a UCF would leave a strong group of 5 to say, this ship could be sinking if Iowa State jumps, or this team jumps, or that school jumps. But once all four of them got together and said, okay, well, we can stabilize this league together, then we'll do that. And yeah, the Pac-12, yeah, in terms of national significance, it's not significant. It hasn't been since Oregon stepped off the field against Ohio State in the championship game, even though Washington made a playoff and was in the game for a half. Nobody really paid attention nor feared that they would beat or challenge Alabama. So it's been a long time for the Pac-12, and it doesn't seem to get better, except for, of course, USC. Richard, appreciate you calling.
One last question.
Yes, sir.
Who do you think will fill in the vacuum as far as the
Nobody.
new Big 12? Not even a Baylor or
No. Baylor's. Do you see Baylor being Ohio State? Do you see Baylor being Clemson?
I think it's not impossible with the right coach that steps in.
I think it's impossible.
The tradition.
Now, the one thing that we can't account for right now, Richard, is NIL. We haven't seen enough to know. The expectation that I have is that all the powers are going to continue to be the powers, and the second tier is going to continue. But there are going to be some outliers. There's going to be some schools that can elevate themselves significantly because of this, and there's going to be some other schools that drop because of this. But I think the power structure is basically going to stay the same. But that's the one thing that's a huge factor in all this that none of us can completely project. And no, I don't see Baylor. I understand your point about Baylor. They've had a nice football program, but to elevate to that Baylor was just 1-11. They've had a very uneven football history that's nowhere close to being. My last take on the Big 12 would be this, Richard. I think if you just want to watch football, I think it's going to be a fascinating conference. It's going to be so balanced. It's going to be a Pac-12 on steroids. It's going to be a so much better Pac-12. You're going to have so many teams. You're going to have so many competitive games. And aside from Kansas and maybe another bad team in a particular year, like it's 1 through 10 could be just 8-4, 7-5, and 6-6 playing one-score games all over the place. It's going to be fun to watch, but who's going to challenge nationally? I don't see anyone unless Houston takes advantage of this great recruiting base they have, and UCF does the same thing in Florida. But that's a big leap to go from where UCF and Houston are to where Ohio State and Clemson are.
UCF long term is not going to be able to do it when they get on a big boy schedule, playing bigger boy teams every week. They're not going to be able to compete in their own state for recruits.
Well,
so
there you go.
I would see them see if possible. But Baylor, I do think people should keep them in mind if they have the right coach. I think they have shown under 2 or 3 different head coaches now that they can do well. But
thanks, Richard.
We'll see, won't we?
I appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thanks. You too.
All right. Let's wrap up with these 2 calls here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
This is Reasonable Gump.
Oh, there he is. How are you?
I'm doing okay. So we're talking about the Big 12 here.
We can talk about anything you want.
Well, I actually do got one, but I something else. But I do like to respect the topic of the video, at least really quickly. My opinion is, I think, pretty much in line with yours. To be perfectly honest, I don't think the Big 12 should be held to the same status as Power 5. I don't even want to say Power 5 because of what I think should happen, did happen. There would not be Power 5 anymore. But
is there going to be a Power 3 or a Power 2? I
mean, basically, if we really get down to it. But I mean, seriously though, am I wrong here? I don't see how adding 4 teams that would be middle of the road, if not bottom of the road, in both the SEC and the Big 10.
Yep.
How does that elevate? How are those pluses? How do they help that conference?
It just
I don't get it.
It makes for fun football if you want to watch a bunch of 38, 35 games against some decent teams, which is fun. That's great. I will enjoy it, but That's not going to challenge Georgia and Ohio State and those schools at the top of the conference. It's just, and none of the remaining schools have ever proven to be elite. I don't care what this guy says about Baylor. Those schools have never been elite for more than one season in a TCU peaking one season out of nowhere.
Right, when they won the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and not only that, Mark, they're losing the one team they had that was semi-competitive in terms of a national standing. That is that they made the playoffs on a regular basis, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
They're losing the one thing they had. Imagine if the ACC lost Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what we're looking at here. Imagine if the ACC lost Clemson, but they added Central Florida and BYU.
Yes, and if the ACC lost Clemson, at least we could still have the conversation, reasonable gum, that Florida State and Miami have the potential and they have a history where they could be great. Nope, Oklahoma State's never been great. Baylor's never been great. TCU's never been great. None of those teams have ever been great, again, for anything other than an isolated season, maybe.
And put competitiveness aside for a second. What are these four programs bringing in terms of, for lack of a better word, natural resources? All the money the Big 12 had was with Texas and a little bit with Oklahoma. But and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, Oklahoma, but the gap between Texas and second place in the entire country as far as money comes is big. Texas just makes the most money out of anyone. What are these four programs bringing in terms of money, in terms of large fan bases, in terms of TV deals? I mean, I guess they're getting the Orlando market with Central Florida. That's really the only thing. Someone else, a few calls back, said that BYU had a large fan base because they have all the Mormons. I'm trying to do a quick calculation of how many Mormons there are in the United States. I don't think very many, but that was a strange thing to say.
No. And we love our guy, Joey Foster. We love Joey. Joey's a great supporter of the channel in more ways than anybody would know. But he is telling me right now on the screen, if you can see it, I disagree with Mark because West Virginia was elite from 2005 to 2012 and again in 2014 and 18. West Virginia was elite in 2018. I can tell you what they did during those seasons is just because they won a Sugar Bowl once doesn't mean that they were elite. No, West Virginia was nowhere close to being elite any of those seasons. Like in a collection of seasons. Yes, again, they will be the TCU of 2014, peaked for 1 year. Yeah, 2005, they had a really good year. A couple other times. I don't know, even though in 2007, when they almost went to the BCS championship game, that they were really elite. They played in a crappy conference. They played in the worst conference. They took advantage of it. No, West Virginia has never been elite.
Eliteness, of course, as you all know, is very subjective. A lot of people, I think, gravitate somewhere towards the gray area.
Hello, sir. You there?
May not always be making the
call drop.
What?
Anyway, I'm sorry, Joey. That's just again. Let's see. Cincinnati's elite.
Am I still here?
Cincinnati elite? No, they're not elite. They went to a playoff. They're not elite. If they keep that up, then we can have the discussion in 4 or 5 years. Was TCU elite in 2014? Yes, that team that they put on the field that year that almost went to the playoff, that won the Peach Bowl, that finished in the top 5 or 6 in the country. Yes, that team was. Now, they didn't really get to prove it against anybody elite, but they were really good. They didn't sustain it.
Am I still here, Mark?
It's not sustained. Those West Virginia teams were not elite. Maybe a team in 2005 that beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl or Oklahoma. Yeah, but they played in awful conferences and they weren't elite. They were really good. They were top 10 good. how many games has Alabama lost in the last 10 years? Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State have lost like basically one game a year. 1 point something games, 1.3 games. Georgia's now joined that since 2017 and to a certain extent 2012. And Oklahoma, statistically, in terms of what they do in the regular season, could be argued. But then, of course, we've seen what they've done in the playoff, which is not a good look because they haven't held up. And I understand your point, Joey. It's not like it's a completely ridiculous statement that you're making, but no. There's a difference between JC being elite and having a good year. Yes. All right, let's get to our, I guess this is turning into our last two calls. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark's Tim. How you doing?
Maybe we just have an issue with my earpiece or something. I see that
Yeah.
we've got
Something going on with you being able to hear us.
Can
Sure, I'm telling
everybody
you, you
else
can't hear me.
hear the caller? Because I suddenly, maybe it's something got detached with my. Oh, back on hold.
Rico's
Well,
time
I
is
got
up.
somebody here in the call, and I cannot hear them.
Ben,
And
can you hear me?
nothing's been changed, so something happened here. So you guys can hear the caller.
Joey?
I can't.
All right.
What's going on there? All the settings are the same, but I heard something.
All right.
Oh,
Welcome to Tim's Voice of
maybe
College
I'm like
Football. How's
cutting
that
off
talk?
the audio in my cord or something. Who knows what's going on? Sounds like Tim jumping on here. I don't know what you just said, Tim, but at least I can hear your voice. Hello? Oh, there we go again.
Yeah,
I can't
Mark, you hear me?
Yes. Hey, Tim.
You can hear me. Okay.
I can now.
Yeah, you dropped the other caller was talking to you, but you couldn't hear him towards the end there. Well, I had a question, just a quick one, because I don't know where I stand on this, because you guys listening to you and the last caller, I don't know how many playoffs have we had?
8.
8. How many teams have won more than how many teams have won more than 3 playoff games?
Alabama's at, I think, 9. Clemson 6. Ohio State 3. Georgia 3. I think that's the count.
Okay, so we have 2 teams with more than 3 wins.
Yes.
Then how many teams do we have with more than 1 win?
Well, those 4. Has anybody else won more than 1? I don't think so.
Yeah,
basically,
like won.
I added this up. Well, LSU won 2 in 1 year. So they did because they won the championship.
And FSU won 2. Florida State won 2.
No, Florida State did not win a national championship.
Oh, no, my bad.
So,
Wait, so you have.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I mean,
look at this way.
I'll just say this, Tim, before you continue, is that I posted a video like a year ago, so there's only been 1 playoff since then. It might have been after the playoff anyway. That basically this is what's happened in the playoff. The SEC, Clemson, and Ohio State have beaten each other. Nobody's beaten Clemson except for the SEC and Ohio State. Nobody's beaten the SEC except for Clemson and Ohio State. Nobody's beaten Ohio State except for Clemson and the SEC. That's the whole playoff.
Oregon has 1 win, right?
They've got 1 win. Yes, they beat the ACC. But I just summarized that those 3, if they're playing anybody else, they're beating them, and the only components that beat them are each other. That's the whole playoff so far.
But when we say that ACC, we're really saying.
Oh man,
saying
what is going
Clemson.
on? I keep losing you, but I guess nobody else is. There's something wrong with my attachment here. Keep talking, Tim.
Can't hear me? Well, I was just going to say that when we say ACC, we say Clemson. When we say the Big Ten, we're talking about Ohio State. Because realistically, there's, we're grouping in the whole conference, but really it's just been, a couple teams, really. Three teams from the SEC, then Ohio State, Clemson. That's pretty much been it. So we're talking about 5 teams dominating the sport. So again, the point of my whole call was, I've been trying to flesh it out. I just started thinking about when I was talking to you, but my big question is we're giving conferences like, oh, this conference, that conference, but really we're only talking about a handful of teams. And then for some teams, you talk about maybe just 1 year.
Yep.
So when we're talking about relevancy and irrelevancy of conferences, we're talking about, you could hold the banner for the ACC if you want to be Clemson and say, you know what? Because Clemson's been a dynasty. They've been awesome.
Yes.
They've won the highest level. Ohio State has won a championship, and they've won. After Urban Meyer, they've won 1 game, right? They won 2 with Urban, and then 1 with Day so far, right? So beyond that, it's just been an SEC show, and then 2 teams. So it's either you take your pick. You want to take Georgia, you want to take LSU, but it's really been Alabama. Really consistently, it's been Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson, and then a couple strong teams from the SEC. But then that's been it for our playoffs for 8 years. So if we're going to say that the mantle for being a good football conference or a elite team is wins in the playoffs, there's only a very few, and I get that's the whole definition of elite. But at the same time, you're talking about how many teams have got in from the ACC. Is it 2? Why do I keep thinking Florida State? Did they won the BCS or something? I thought they won.
Yeah, they won the
BCS
last
time.
They won the last BCS championship. They went to the first playoff and they lost 1 game to Oregon.
Okay. But then besides that, so the ACC's had two teams in the playoffs.
My
had 2
earpiece
teams in the playoffs.
keeps cutting out. So we'll let Tim talk a little bit, and then we're going to cut out because whatever connection issue I have, I keep correcting it, but for a split second. So
All right. Well, maybe I'll
guess right now. But sorry, Tim, we are going to cut this call off, unfortunately, and I will look to see what's in the chat. Good to see you, Ballard, and everybody else. I appreciate you calling. Unfortunately, we've got an issue with there's a connection issue. So, Reasonable Gump, appreciate it. Thank you so much for calling. Sorry that we got cut off. And then, there's a connection, and I keep messing with it, and it's like, works for 5 seconds and then nothing. All right. Any other comments in here we should hit on? Good conversation concerning the Big 12. I think it's fascinating. I think it's interesting. Again, I don't want to see a clean transition. I don't want to see a transition between, let's see, let me get rid of all this. I don't want to see a transition that's clean. I don't want to see Texas and Oklahoma leave the Big 12 and the 4 jump on at the same time, and therefore we've got a Big 12 that ends with Oklahoma, Texas, let's say in 2023, 2022, and then they decide to work things out with the SEC and join and coordinate that transition, and then the next year we've got the other 4. I want those teams to be mixed up and have to play each other. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to see. Is all of that have to take place? All right. Let's hit on some things here. Of course, the Amazon link. Grab the Amazon link in the description section of the videos and help us build the channel. Cheryl, Exploring with Ben. I don't want to leave anybody out, but I appreciate Joey, of course. I appreciate all of you reminding people about the Amazon link and reminding people about all sorts of good stuff that they need to latch onto there in the chat. Cheryl was saying 50,000 subs. Man, that sounds good. We are crawling right now with subs. I get like 1 or 2 a day. That's going to be a long time. I'm going to be like in the coffin with 50,000 subs, but we're going to do better than that. But Cheryl, thank you so much for everyone for stating the goal right there. Love 100,000 subs. I really want to get to 100,000 subs. Would be amazing. But yes, 50,000 subs. Let's get there. We need about 16,000. All right. We've got a series going. Is this the year? Is this the year blank? Is this the year Notre Dame finally wins a major bowl game? It's been since 1994. Is this the year Notre Dame wins a major bowl game? Check out the video. Is this the year Michigan wins in Columbus at Ohio State? You know when the last time that happened? 2000. Is this the year Michigan finally wins in Columbus? Is this the year Texas A&M finally wins a conference championship? It's been since 1998. So you may say, well, it's been a bad move for Texas A&M to join the SEC. They're 0 for 10 in the SEC. Well, they were 0 for 13 in the Big 12 before moving to the SEC. They are 0 for their last 23 shots at a conference championship. So is this the year Texas A&M wins a conference championship? I can cut the same thing with Nebraska. It's been since 1999. Miami, it's been since 2003 winning a conference championship. Texas, 2009. That's now going on 13 years since winning a conference championship. So we may answer those questions as well. If you have any requests for Mark, is this the year blank? I think Lewis threw out, is this the year David Shaw gets fired? Maybe I'll take that one on. We've got a series on legit national championships. Alabama says it has 18 national championships. How many national championships should Alabama claim? Check out the video. Check out the video. Ohio State claims 8 national championships. How many should the Buckeyes claim? Check out the video. Should I do any more of those? Who do you want to see? Shoelace Sooner reminded us that you can contribute to the recorded videos with the super thanks right there. MSU Detroit fan, is this the year Scott Frost finally gets something done in Nebraska? So that's what I said. Conference championship in Nebraska, 1999. Find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can see me argue with people on Twitter. It happens almost every day. I try to stay away from Twitter, but when I jump on just to post a video or whatever, I always see some asinine comment that I just cannot help myself responding to. Daniel wants USC titles. Okay. Okay. On the flip side, I was thinking about I need to look up to see the last time Kansas did not finish in the basement of the Big 12. Yeah, I really don't ever read on when that was. They were great in 2007, 11-1, almost won the national championship. And then, they were still pretty decent for a couple more years. I think they've been in the basement of the Big 12 since like 2010. When is this the year Kansas does not finish in last place? I might do that. I'm expecting nobody to really care about that. Tim is saying USC is 11 recognized national championship. And if I'm not mistaken, Mark added 2. I'm going to have to review that, Tim. But I love doing those videos. I would do those for every team. Auburn's an interesting one, I think. I think Auburn is an interesting one. I think there are championships for those Auburn Tigers to claim. All right. Yes, JC, Alabama, Ohio State tied for best college football winning percentage. Now, to be officially tied, they would have to have the exact same record. So I'm sure there's some kind of decimal point difference on the fourth or fifth digit there. But yeah, virtually tied. We'll be watching that week to week. Ohio State caught and passed Michigan a couple of years ago. Is this the year the Big Ten West finally wins the Big Ten championship game? 0-8 for the Big Ten West. 0-8. Ohio State's won 5. Penn State won. Michigan won. Michigan State won. On the losing side for the Big Ten West, what is it? Wisconsin's lost 4. Iowa's lost 2, and Northwestern has lost 2. So is this the year that the Big Ten West finally? We ran down what conference championship games would have looked like over the course of that conference's championship game history if there was a 1 versus 2 seeding. We did that in the Big Ten and the Pac-12. I've got all the notes for the SEC, but you guys care about that? It would have changed the SEC championship game about half the time if we had a straight 1 versus 2 and no divisions. Talk is Pitt. Is this the year Rutgers wins 8 games? That's kind of an arbitrary figure. Last year I posted the video. Is this the year Pitt wins the ACC championship? No, I did not. Yes, Daniel, might be the Big Ten West's last chance. A lot of people out there like Wisconsin as an upset winner of the Big Ten. Yes, Tim. 07 and 08. If I had some of you guys on board, we could do like this massive workshop, and I would do all my work on all the national championships, and I'd bring it for one last look over and say, let's grind through these. Did I miss something? Not saying my little system's infallible. I did Nebraska. I'm going to look at Nebraska's national championships. I already did. Once you get before somewhere in the 40s, 50s, 30s, like the 20s are really suspect. And before that's really suspect. It's difficult. You don't know how good these conferences are. You would have to do a deep dive into how good the conferences are. So if you can, determine whether Saginaw Valley was actually something in 1908. So that's difficult. I did see there's an article on SB Nation where I enjoyed the article and I've looked at it several times, and this individual takes every year and says, this is the national championship scenario. And it's just a couple lines. It's nothing in depth, but says, keep your national championship, or you get a t-shirt too, or whatever. But even that's not. I think that if we've got, let's say, 3 undefeated teams in a particular year, and they all were on the Power 5 level, they all get to claim a national championship. Why not? Who is it for me or anybody to say, you played a slightly better schedule than them? Unless we're talking about different levels of football. So, for example, when Tulane's going undefeated in 1998 versus Tennessee, no. They're not even playing practically the same game. Now there are situations in which we have a 1-loss champion to compare against, let's say, an undefeated Boise State TCU that proved at the end of the year they could knock off a heavyweight, then that becomes we can possibly say, TCU, Boise State, go ahead and claim a share of a national championship. You were undefeated, and had the recognized champion been undefeated, I would have said, you know what? No, they are the champion. They went undefeated, but they lost a game. TCU, Boise State, whomever in that particular year did not lose a game, and they played somebody. Tulane didn't play anyone in 1998. Those two schools in particular, there are years in which they played somebody in non-conference that's legit, like top 15 in the country, beat them, then played a bowl game, legit, and then had some Mountain West games or WAC games that were against good teams. I don't think they really substantiate a national championship claim, but a number, 21 Fresno State and a number 24 Nevada, those kind of games that show that, okay, they're playing some good teams, but those don't justify national championships in my eyes, playing like decent teams. Yes, the media, my goodness, 1993. Why is Florida State the national champion in 1993? Why? Because people wanted to vote for them. They lost a game. Notre Dame lost a game. They played. If you're going to do that, then you know what? Nebraska lost a closer game in the Orange Bowl. That game was to the wire in the 94 Orange Bowl, meaning the 93 national championship season. Nebraska can say, you know what? We entered that game undefeated. We lost a game, just like Florida State lost a game to Notre Dame. They lost a game. They're not getting the championship. Why don't we all just share the championship? The problem is, of course, there was a vote back then. And even if I was given a ballot back in 1993, I would have had to decide too. You couldn't just say, well, I think all three should share a championship because we've got a stupid system and we don't have a playoff. So we're going to share a championship here. No, you had to vote for somebody number one, number two, number three. Who won head-to-head, Seth? 1993, Notre Dame. Notre Dame won head-to-head over Florida State. Notre Dame, if anyone can claim an outright championship in 93, it's Notre Dame. But I tend to think, you know what? Notre Dame beat Florida State. Notre Dame lost another game. Nebraska barely lost on a missed field goal against Florida State. You know what? It's a three-way tie. See, and shoot, you could toss West Virginia in there. Now, people are going to go crazy, and I'll defend Joey's West Virginia Mountaineers here, that they lost 41-6 in the Sugar Bowl. But why are we magnifying 41-6? Shouldn't be a comparison sport. Comparison of scores. West Virginia lost one game, just like Nebraska, Florida State, and Notre Dame did. Well, they would have gotten killed if they would have played. Well, they didn't play them. And West Virginia in 1993, West Virginia won. They had a difficult schedule. I'm surprised when I look back how good West Virginia's schedule was in 1993. In 1993, I hope Joey's still here to hear this. In 1993, West Virginia beat number 17 Louisville. They beat number 4 Miami, number 11 Boston College. 3 ranked wins, highly ranked wins, pretty highly ranked wins. All right. Jay Chillin, only because FSU was the in thing. Yeah, the cool team. They were the cool team to root for. Yeah, they had the flashy quarterback who won the Heisman, and they were flash and speed, and that's not a result. Yes, Jay Chillin. Too many knuckleheads voting who don't take logic in hand. They're like, oh, Florida State, we think we just watched them lose this game. But you know what? If they played again, well, they didn't play again. They played once. They lost. They can share a national championship. If you get Nebraska, if you want to get Nebraska involved, then you share a national championship. But if you just want to say, well, it came down to Notre Dame and Florida State because Florida State took care of Nebraska, well, you can't use that logic just there and not use it over here to say, well, Florida State lost to Notre Dame. You either use the logic and share the national title amongst those 3, if not 4 with West Virginia, or you say, no, Florida State knocked out Nebraska. But then if we apply that logic, well, Notre Dame beat Florida State, so Notre Dame is the outright champion. Either way, you can go with the logic either way. My feelings were hurt on what? 1993 Notre Dame. I am no defender of Notre Dame football. That's what's funny here sometimes is that people will hear me defend a team in a particular year and if they don't know who I root for, they don't know anything about me, they haven't watched before, they think, oh, like Mark's team, and they'll think I root for all sorts. I've been accused of rooting for all sorts of teams because people just think, oh, if Mark was defending that team or arguing for their right to a championship or something, he must be rooting for that team. That's his team. No. Yes, Dave. Big Notre Dame homer. That's me. Love it. Huge Notre Dame fan. Oh, my word. See, this is where I can pull off the whole unbiased deal. You know what? I grew up hating Notre Dame. Hated them. I hated Notre Dame so much when I was growing up that I rooted for Michigan to beat Notre Dame because I thought, at Big Ten, Ohio State, I didn't even have to think about it. I rooted for Michigan to beat Notre Dame when I was growing up. That's how much I hated Notre Dame. And I can still argue that in 1993, they deserve a share of the national championship, if not the outright national championship. And yes, Tim, your USC Trojans ripped off in those seasons in 90. The 06, they should have been in there against Florida, but they didn't get ripped off in that season. They lost 2 games and all that. But 07, 08, it's a travesty. We did not. Oh man, the playoffs in the 2000s would have been crazy good. Canes 1989. Mark, what do you think about James Madison football moving into the same conference as App State? I think it's cool. I think there's a burgeoning rivalry there. James Madison, of course, been a top FCS school. Don't ask me how good because I don't follow that. So I don't know. I just know that they've been really good. All right. Very good. Appreciate you all being here. Please hit the like button on your way out. On Monday, we've got 2 shows for you on Monday. So this is what we're going to do. At 2:00 Eastern time, we're going Texas A&M for an hour, answering your comments and questions. We got Andrew Hattersley coming on the line from Texas A&M's Gig'em 247 Sports, Texas A&M for 1 hour. Then at 6 Eastern, Remember about a month to 6 weeks ago, we did a channel update show, and I said, you know what? We want to get great guests on here. We already have great guests, but we want more great guests. And you guys made all your suggestions on whom we should have on here. Well, I said, at some point, we're going to do a little workshop. And what we're going to do is, if you want Joel Klatt, if you want Kirk Herbstreit, if you want fill in the blank, then we're going to get on here. I'm going to say, okay. Oh, okay. I get a bunch of votes for Kirk Herbstreit. I am tweeting him right now. Everybody, get on your phone, get on your laptop. I'm tweeting this out. Now you need to retweet it. You need to pin Kirk Herbstreit. You need to reply to the tweet and say, Kirk, you need to be on Voice of College Football. You need to like it, retweet, just drive him nuts. And then Joel Klatt can do the same thing. Now, this will not be the show for many of you, but for those of you who want to see those kind of guests on here, I was excited to hear about a few people who may appear on the Voice of College Football. I will not say the names because it is not definite. I was excited to hear here in the last couple of days a few names of, yes, some big time folks that may be here at the Voice of College Football. So again, 2 Eastern, Texas A&M. 6 Eastern, hopefully with a better earpiece connection. We'll look at that so we can take calls without interruption. 6 Eastern. Tim's here. He's down for it. D-Rock Irish is going to be here. Roundabout says Klatt's a joke. Come on. JC, am I going live later on this evening? I don't believe so. I've got work to do. Got to build this channel, folks. And the live streams are great. The call-in show is phenomenal, but I got to get videos out there. I got to get other things rocking. I got to figure out YouTube. That's the thing I need to work on. I need to put the calendar on pause for 3 months and just go figure out how to do all this. But that's not happening. Maybe next year I will take off the months of May, June, and most of July. Wouldn't that be a nice luxury to have? Take off those 3 months, come back with a bang, like all new, crazy good, locked in. But we got to figure YouTube out. Got to do that. D-Rock Irish, appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for always being here. Roundabout, CS, of course, Jay Chillin, Michael Campbell, thank you so much for that. I don't need Marks who love Notre Dame, but I need to see his Cincinnati Bearcats love. It's Ohio love. Yes, the Cincinnati Bearcats just tearing up Ohio State on the recruiting path for wink, wink, for 2023. Okay. Tim says, Mark, you need to go on some shows and let audiences know about the Voice of College Football. I do, but nobody invites me. You know, what's funny is when I had a lot less subs, I used to get invited all over the place to call in shows. See you, Cheryl. Thank you. But it doesn't happen these days for some reason. But anyway, that's fine. All right, everyone. See you Monday at 2 Eastern, Texas A&M, 6 Eastern. We contact our next level guests. See you then.